Okay, thanks for that wonderful introduction there. Hi guys, my name's Cliff. I'm from the Veterans for Scottish Independence Group 2.0. I sort of wanted to come on and speak to you guys because I think there is an awful lot of overlap between us on the veterans side of things and you guys on the pensioner side of things. Obviously, there's an awful lot of veterans that are pensioners. And between the two of us, we've probably got I would think, the toughest nut to crack as far as convincing people to vote for independence. Probably not as tough as it was 2013, 2014, because of subsequent actions from Westminster. But I think for the groups, the sort of that are out there, I think we've probably got one of the toughest nuts to crack. I'm a military veteran. I spent 24 years in the army, and I think you guys all got myself the bio I put forward, and I had an absolutely fantastic career all over the place. But as I was going out and about in the world, I discovered that there are small countries out there that are having a good go of things and are on friendly terms with their neighbours as well. I was also beginning to realise that the history that I had not been taught, as opposed to being taught, the history I had not been taught at school, was a huge omission in my knowledge, and I sort of started picking up my knowledge of my country from there on in. So basically, we as veterans, any opportunity we can to promote the cause of independence, we will grasp. Because like yourselves, we are often a group that gets bypassed for sort of the more headline acts that may come along. And talking of a headline act, I think Nicola's due on in about a minute's time. So I've been upstaged by David Cameron, so hey, the First Minister doing it, I have no problems with. Anybody got any questions there?
Do you do any actual stalls, Cliff?
We don't actually, or we haven't actually done any stalls as yet. We tend to sort of latch ourselves on to anybody that's sort of in the community, and we do it that way. On the rallies and the marches, we tend to take part in the marches, maybe a speaking slot, but we don't actually do the stalls as yet. Although we do have the gazebo and stuff to do it with. I think it's just sheer laziness on our part at this moment in time.
So how do you feel about, let's say, the other guys that you served with? You must have served with a number of different regiments, possibly, when you were serving?
Yeah, I started off with the Queen's Own Highlander. I did 14 years with them, as far east as Hong Kong, as far east as South Korea, as far west as Belize, down to Falklands, north to Canada, that type of thing. When I transferred to the medical corps and did a further 10 years, I started serving with a lot more regiments with as you were attached to various units doing various different things. Not all of them Scottish regiments. So it's a cross section of society as when I was in the army.
So we do have a question in from Janet. Can you speak of what an independent Scottish Defence Force would look like, and what arguments can we use to reassure people?
The big, I'll start with the sort of the negative that the establishment put forward is that, this big scare story that we would not be able to defend ourselves, which is of course absolute nonsense. The only sort of paper we can draw back on was the white paper put out prior to the last independence referendum, which is 6 years old, and I know is getting looked at again. Mm-hmm. So the figures I'm going off are what we had then. What we're looking for is a defence force. Whatever it actually gets called, it will be a defence force because it will be under a certain amount of troops. So it will be classed as a defence force. Heck, the UK, technically speaking, has a defence force now. Such are the numbers so low. We have got, 10,000 miles, just over 10,000 miles of coastline to defend, plus our offshore assets. So we will probably be maritime heavy as opposed to ground forces. So we will need the assets to look after that. As far as the ground forces go, we will probably have what's called a brigade strength, which is anything between 3,000 to 5,000 troops. It will need to be set up in a way that the boys and girls that we ask to deploy are able to do a job. And we're certainly not aiming to hang on to the coattails of the US, and do this protracted retreat from empire that Westminster seems to have been doing since 1945. So we're not talking about a defence force for that. But what some people get a little bit confused with is even working under the United Nations. Sometimes, on peacekeeping duties, you have to actually win the peace first. So our boys and girls deploying need to one, have the correct training, two, the correct equipment, and three, the correct mandate for being there. Like any other country of our size, we will have a defence force. New Zealand has a very good defence force. Their infantry regiment and their teeth arms and sport arms are incredibly well renowned worldwide. So we'll be along the same lines. Will we be part of NATO? That's a choice for an independent Scotland. That will be our choice. It certainly, as I was mentioned the other day, it certainly will not be a scaled down version of what the UK is just now. We do not need nuclear weapons. I can't stand the damn things. Right, so let's get rid of them. We don't need vanity projects like the aircraft carriers, that type of thing.
So how many boats do you think we would need?
The ships. Well, I'm not quite sure what the difference is between a boat and a ship, although my Navy colleagues will probably tell me. I think a boat you can put on a ship, but a ship you can't put on a boat. I think that was explained to me one time, but I'm not too sure if that's the right definition or not. How many? A flotilla of frigates for sure. So that's what it's 8 possibly. That side of thing. We'll need some sort of amphibious deployment ship so we can get our ground forces to an area, for example, disaster relief, a helicopter support ship, some along that lines. But again, tied in with the maritime will be the air assets as well. The Norwegians have got some very good air defence, submarine hunter aircraft that we could have. And like it or not, Scotland sits in a very, very strategic place in the world. And NATO will, I think, want to keep a hold of Scotland. They will court us. And no, we do not need, as was said in the last referendum, we do not need to give permission to house any nuclear weapons on our soil to be a member of NATO. There are countries, members of NATO, that most definitely turn around and say, you do not get in here with nuclear weapons on board. So I think looking after ourselves, being part of NATO is no bad thing. We did a positive thing as part of NATO in the former Yugoslavia. I did a 6-month tour, both as part of the UN and then as part of NATO, and that was a positive thing. That was maintaining the peace between the warring factions.
Excellent answer. Lots of information.
Angie and Dave would like to know, do you anticipate that UK troops will be used to settle Scottish unrest in our journey towards independence?
I have, from the outset, turned around and said that UDI is a non-starter. The only way troops would deploy onto the streets is if there is a complete breakdown of law and order. That's the only way the troops get onto the streets. The way things are at the moment, I can't see that happening. There is absolutely no indication from our side of it, the Yes movement, that's the way we're heading. I'm not picking up anything along that lines. No. And as for anybody on the other side, any of the less desirable elements from the no side of things, Right? They are so small and inconsequential that the police would be able to deal with them. I cannot see troops on the streets of Scotland. This is not going to be another Northern Ireland. This is not going to be another Aden, or it's not going to be another Cyprus, that type of thing. There's a huge step putting troops on the ground. And it's a huge thing. And, the first thing you got to do is convince the local police that it's needed. Yeah, because they do not want troops on the ground.
Of course.
It's not a soldier's responsibility to police anything. They're
No.
not trained. So no, the Scottish police force is good enough for keeping us straight on that side.
And one from Mary Stewart. In an independent Scotland, will veterans be properly cared for, unlike at present?
That is what we're hoping for, and I have spoken with MPs, MSPs about this on behalf of the veterans. At present, Veteran Affairs has been farmed out to the devolved administrations and to the councils in England. So this thing, when whoever's in power in Westminster stands up and says, right, we want to honour the Forces Covenant, that's all they have to do, is to stand up and announce it in Parliament, and they all clap their hands, and that's it. But they don't actually look after the boys and girls. So to answer that question, yes, with our budget that Scotland will have, there needs to be something set aside for veterans. And I don't mean taking it away from anybody else. All we're asking is, if we get put into harm's way, then the people putting us into harm's way look after what comes back, that type of thing. And that is very close to my heart, because I've experienced what the care is like, or was like. It's a lot better now. And it was a complete disaster.
It's always been the case, of course, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And
troops are always abandoned after they've done their bit and they're not needed anymore.
Well, we've got to make a break from that. And let's hope within all aspects of a new and independent Scotland that we break the mould. There's no point at all in Scotland setting itself up independent just to be a scaled down version of what's south of the Rio Tweed.
Caroline and Keith have said, are there a greater number of Scots in the UK's armed forces than would be reflected by head of population? It was a tragic truth in WW2 that twice as many Scots were killed than our per head of population might have justified.
Yes, there always has been. And that is an awful lot to do with the way the regimental system was set up. It's been greatly destroyed now by successive governments. But when we had our county and regional regiments, there was a great esprit de corps amongst the regiments. The recruiting staff would go in, and the areas were not the most highly industrialised areas, especially the Highlands. So you were getting, options were fishing. Well, in my case was, up in Thurso, it was either get into Dounreay or join the forces, basically. My own experiences of witnessing the strength of the Scottish element within the army would have been on the ceasefire in the first Gulf War. And it was absolutely stunning to see all the vehicles flying, the Saltire, the Lion Ramp, and this was from all sorts of units. And just about every single Scottish infantry regiment, bar one, was deployed on that one. And the one that wasn't was actually on duty in Northern Ireland. Tank Regiment, Royal Tank Regiment was out there, as was their cavalry regiment, the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards. So, and their guns were out there as well. So everybody that could have deployed under us with a Scottish cap badge was deployed.
Cliff, when you get the chance to talk current Scottish military personnel in terms of independence?
Mixed. Yeah, very mixed. It's broken down into three areas. Vast majority don't want anything to do with politics, right? And I've been there myself. I know what it's like. You have then those that are staunchly against the idea of independence, and then you have the guys and girls that are for independence. All right, it's pretty much like what we're facing out there. From the positive side of things, I always like to be positive, right? From those I've spoken to that have expressed an interest in Scotland becoming independent, all of them would want to join the Scottish Defence Force.
Yvonne has managed to type her wee message, and she says, "I hope that veterans would be not rough sleeping so much in future. I've tried to raise this with my MSP, but the reply was very general or more general."
Yeah, it's an area they don't want to go, or some of them don't want to go near, and for the obvious reason. Yeah, it has been delegated down to the Scottish Parliament to deal with veterans affairs. Unfortunately, they don't have the money to deal with it. I mean, military veterans take up roughly seeing some from the Legion, it was sort of like 10% of the population. It's a huge amount of military veterans. Not all of them, thankfully, are falling through the system. But yes, there are those people that are on the streets, and we need to be better than what has gone before us.
Absolutely.
But for us to justify all the time and effort that we're putting in to get our independence than what exists just now.
I don't know how you keep so positive, Cliff.
Absolutely.
It's part of my nature, and it's part of what I've been through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no matter what's getting thrown at us, it will never be as bad or as rough as what my roughest day has ever been.
Aye.
Yeah. So you know, I don't find it problematic being positive. I do have my days, I can assure you. Yeah. But most of the time, yeah, it's positive mental attitude.
I find the daily news from all over, I have to say, quite hard to stay positive through it all and not see all the downsides.
What's happened now is there's 24-hour news channels. There's no such thing as 24-hour news. All they do is loop it, or every hour and a half, if it's a particularly busy day, it'll be exactly the same stories. So you're continually getting this negative reinforced as far as the news goes. I'll have various sites to give up some, if anything, important breaks, but otherwise I stick to normal hours of news. You know, you're 6.
I have another question for you. This is from Angie and Dave Maxwell again. What would your estimate be of a realistic timescale for removal of the nuclear elements from Scotland?
Right, the nuclear elements can be gone within weeks. That's the weapon systems. Aldermarsh down south of London, there, 40 miles south of London, is the storage facility for them. Right, they've got the weapons down there. The actual Trident submarines, right, and the rusting hulks from previous submarines, which also need tidying up and cleaned up before our UK move out. Well, that might take a little bit longer. Remember, if we get rid of the nuclear weapons, that's them off Scotland's soil. We might be left with nuclear-powered submarines, but then we can start leasing the base to them. Right? And Devonport, south of England, is able to take Trident. And then I heard something very briefly about them storing the weapons across in the US, or the US taking the missiles into their basket, and then our UK Trident subs go out there, weaponize themselves, and then go off and do what patrolling they do. Time scale on that? That's a very good question. But the removal of the weapons would happen within the period of negotiations from the referendum to us becoming independent, which I think is somewhere in the region of 2 years, is it not? I think that was being thought about.
Depends how many arguments we have, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Yeah. Well, there's again a lot of thing about how much debt is Scotland going to get saddled with. Well, technically, going from the UN charters, exactly, 0, because we're an emerging country. But then we are not responsible for any debt from the country that was before. And of course, if they want us to take on a debt, any debt, then they've got to play good guy with us about the border and removal of Trident, etc., etc., etc.
And the assets.
Yeah. Now we've got to be careful with the assets. What would they give us? Yeah. The last thing we want to be saddled with is redundant or useless bits of kit. Because then we're in no better state, and having nothing at all. So yeah, the asset thing, we might not get hardware, but we might get money off them to equivalent to that, which would then allow us to buy more state-of-the-art equipment to the guys and girls have to deploy with equipment to do the job.
Yeah, Pippa has said, what do you think about the poppy cult, which is now about glorifying war and Britain's role in it?
We always coming up this time of year, keep a watch out for what we term as the poppy Nazis. Yeah, you have to wear a poppy. You have to have this colour poppy on. If you want to wear a poppy, you wear a poppy. What colour is it? Whatever colour you want to wear, whatever you want that to represent, you wear that colour of poppy. But the fact that they're slapping the poppy onto fast jets, onto armoured vehicles, that type of thing, is a glorification, which the whole thing about the poppy was originally not for. It was as an act of remembrance for those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. But that has been lost, twisted in translation, and like much else when it comes to the veterans, etc., by the current administration, it's twisted to their own benefits.
Can I move on to a wee word from Janet, who has said, has the Scottish Government ever sought your view or opinions?
Yes, they have. We did it when the veterans first got together. It was Indy Live. Young Kevin, who runs that, heads that one up. Yes, he was noticing on Facebook veterans were speaking up and kind of getting lost in the clutter. Yes, so he got us together at Bears Den, and we had Keith Brown came along, a veteran of the Falklands War. So he was there, and we have had sporadic conversations with him since then, and very recently we had a conversation with Carl Monaghan about setting up some stuff with the veterans. So yes, we have been in touch with Scottish Government. Angie
and Dave have just said they're delirious about your comments on the getting rid of the nuclear crap. Nuclear equipment.
The nuclear, the chemical, the biological, that stuff. That stuff used to terrify us. It really did, because the other stuff you can sort of train to defend against, that type of thing. But when that stuff's deployed, there's absolutely no defence, and they are not point weapons. I don't care what anybody says. They are indiscriminate. You're not going to be taking out service personnel. You're going to be taking out everybody.
Janet has also asked, how much of this fictitious JERS contribution, how much of that is spent on defence? And what would we gain financially if we didn't have to chip in for that?
Again, it's under review, the spending for the Scottish Defence Force, but it's going to be nowhere near that amount.
No.
And we're not paying for the vanity projects. I wouldn't like to put a figure on it just now because it is under review. Yeah, and it's like I said, we need to be honest. I wouldn't want to just pluck a figure out of thin air.
Caroline and Keith say, how does Costa Rica manage without armed forces?
No, I have no idea. We have got far too much in the way of offshore assets to leave it without a defence force. We need, like it or not, there are bad people out there that want to do bad things, and it's regardless of who we are. Target, they will attack it. We need to be able to defend those installations, and we need to be shown to defend it. So surface ships, maritime aircraft, and of course a couple of diesel-powered submarines. The Germans manufacture some great submarines, but it is a fact. Their submarines are still rated as being some of the best in the world.
Right.
Yeah, a couple of those diesel-operated boats, and well, diesel electric, and no one knows where they are, and they can, so that in itself is a deterrent.
Pippa actually asks the same question of Caroline and Keith. She said that Iceland don't have any defence forces either.
No.
No, but they've got 2 big American bases up there.
A wee place called Keflavik. I think there's quite a few Americans there.
Having landed there en route to Canada, it's not so wee. Now, and if you think about all the airports in Scotland, Stornoway Airport, Bendecular, all of those airports, if you Google Earth them, you will actually see they are rigged up as NATO emergency fields. You'll see the off-ramps for the jet revetments, etc., already in place. But yeah, we are prime real estate for that type of thing. But yeah, Iceland has a defence force. I mean, their boats did a very successful, was it 2 Cod Wars they've won?
Pippa follows that comment up with saying in future it'll be cyber attacks, not physical attacks.
Absolutely, and that has been highlighted. Absolutely agree with Pippa that the cyber attacks are going to be in there. So because world economy is so reliant on the internet, the easiest way to cripple a country these days would be through cyber attacks, and also cripple their power stations that all run off the compressed, etc. Yep. So yes, absolutely. We'll still need an overt force though.
Everybody wants to put their mic on and their camera, and we'll give this man a round of applause in a moment or two.